Hi everyone. Won't have too long for a hang sesh tonight. I want to get off at 10:30, which leaves me about 20 minutes to say what I want to say. But I want to talk about this point of a time, times, and half a time, or times, time, and half a time that we hear about in the Bible, okay, and Daniel. When was that time fulfilled? It's a good question. Don't really need my glasses when I'm this close to the screen. Um, so in Daniel 9:26, we read, "And after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with a flood. Until the end of the war, desolation are determined." So in that scripture, Daniel 9:26, we learn that Messiah will be cut off, and that there will be this time where the prince of the people who is to come shall destroy the city and sanctuary. So when was that time? Well, Messiah was cut off. I believe this is in reference to his crucifixion. And then the prince of the people who is to come, or the people of the prince who is to come. Well, that's a reference to Titus, who, under the rule of Vespasian, a prince, came into the city walls and laid siege to the temple. I was going to try and make a joke there, but I didn't want to. So in Daniel 12:7, we have this. "Then I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and swore by him who lives forever, that it shall be for a time, times, and half a time, and when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things will be finished." So this is the most determining key. This is the main decipher to this prophecy. "For the time, times, and half a time shall not have run their course until the power of the holy people has been completely shattered." This eschatological tenant, this end times item, must be ticked off, for it is the signifier of all these things being finished. Now, you don't hear that from people who speak about a future coming, that indeed the temple falling in the first century, that Herodian temple, that would be the signifier of the end of the age. And that's why Matthew 24, verse 1 to 3, contain the questions. When will this temple fall? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Because they're all tied in together. The falling, or rather the felling of the temple, being the signifier of the end. So I want to go back into the text because someone raised this question, was asking, saying, look, as preterists, we don't want to fall folly to the same mistakes that futurists make. We want to be sure that we're going by the book. We're using the most reasonable and sort of economic and using the most finesse in our interpretation, and that we're not subscribing to a doctrine through some kind of ideological possession. So this is what the writer of this book, The Four Corners, which you can find on facebook.com/Preterism. If you scroll through one of the recent comments, Vernon, who edits the page, put this PDF file up. So he says, contrary to the view, and the view is this: the prophecy of the 70 weeks therefore reveals that the desolation of the temple in AD 70 would establish the Messiah's reign over a new covenant people and conclude the period which had been allotted to the Jews. The disciples were therefore not in error to believe that the destruction of the temple, the coming of the Lord in his kingdom, and the end of the Jewish age were connected and would take place in their lifetime. Contrary to this view, it has been asserted that the Old Covenant was abolished at the cross, and the New Covenant was therefore established at that time. However, Paul, writing after the cross, declared that the Old Covenant was being brought to an end, 2 Corinthians 3:11, growing old, becoming obsolete, and ready to vanish away, Hebrews 8:13. This present tense language demonstrates that the Old Covenant was still in the process of passing away after the crucifixion. Moreover, Paul wrote that the Jews remained God's chosen people after the cross, Romans 9-11. It was the Old Covenant that afforded the Jews this privilege. This means that the Old Covenant remained valid after the cross. Furthermore, Paul spoke of the temple as having a standing in his day and said that its rituals would remain valid until it no longer held such a standing. Hebrews 9, verses 8-10. The Old Covenant was therefore still binding to the Jews who remained in it during the apostolic period, and it would not be dissolved until the temple's demise. This is the event that would close the Jewish age and not the cross. Matthew 24, verses 1-3. Thus, the New Covenant would not be established until AD 70. And that makes a lot of sense. As per the prophecy of Daniel, the times, and half a time would not be fulfilled until the power of the holy people was completely shattered. There was that period that was cut off, where the Messiah was cut off. So let's get into that. This means that there was a 40-year interval between the first and second visitation of the Messiah. Hosea prophesied of this interval by declaring that the Messiah would come to Israel like the former and latter rain. Hosea 6:3. And you can also check out, I don't know what that contraction is for. Hold on, that's embarrassing. JAS, Bible contraction. Bible, oh, is it for James? That's not how I would contract that. That's embarrassing. Yeah, in James 5:7-8. So he'd come like the former and latter rains. In Judah, the former rain arrived in the fall and the latter in the spring. Notably, there was a 4-month interval between those two seasons. This is affirmed by the schedule of the Mosaic feasts, which celebrate these seasons, Leviticus 23:5-34. It may now be observed that each of these months stood for a decade, and thus foreshadowed the 40-year interval between the first and second coming of the Lord, the period between his ministry and the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. The parable of the barren fig tree also prophesied of this interval. In this parable, Jesus spoke of a man visiting a fig tree and gave it 4 years to produce fruit before he would return to cut it down. Luke 13:6-9. The cutting down of the tree spoke of judgment against Israel. Luke 13:1-5. Jesus made an initial appearance to her, looking for fruit, and he would return to strike her down if this did not produce any. In the parable, the span between these visitations is described as 4 years. It is now apparent that this period represents the 4 decades between the first and second visitations of the Messiah. See Revelation 20:4-6. This interval would afford the Jews time to repent for crucifying their king and keep the rebellious in darkness regarding the hour of his coming to ensure their judgment. So that completes the first chapter of this book, and I think it's offered us quite a lot of compelling evidence that lends a lot of credence to the preterist perspective, certainly. The next chapter concerns Matthew 24:4-8. And Jesus answered them, "See that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you dare not be alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pangs or birth pains. I think it's interesting, isn't it? Nation rising against nation. And I suppose the people of that generation would have had their opinions about what was right and what was wrong, but ultimately it's all just tweedling along, conforming to a singular will, and we should just be mindful of it. We should just be outside observers in a certain sense, unaffected, not worried, not alarmed. The Lord told his disciples that they would see false prophets, wars, famines, and earthquakes, but the world would not yet. Sorry, the end, not the world. Because we're not talking about the end of the world. We're talking about the end of the age. The Olam Haba and the Olam Hava, is that what it was? And this describes this age and the age to come. That was the paradigm that Jesus Christ and Paul the Apostle used. And you can see in Hebrews, they speak about existing in the current age and waiting at the end of it for the age to come. So Jesus tells them that the end would come after the gospel had been preached throughout the world in Matthew 24:14. And this end would be signaled by the abomination of desolation, which was foretold by Daniel, Matthew 24:15. It will be demonstrated that this signal took place in AD 66. In speaking of false messiahs, wars, famines, and earthquakes that would arrive before the end, Jesus was therefore referring to things that would precede the time of the end in AD 66. The New Testament soundly affirms that these things came to pass in the years preceding AD 66. Several first-century historians have also documented the fulfillment of these predictions, and others in the Olivet Discourse. These historians include the previously mentioned Josephus, a Jewish Pharisee, as well as the following: Tacitus, a Roman senator; Seneca, a Roman philosopher; Suetonius, another historian of Rome. These authors were by no means advocates of the Lord's teachings. They were therefore not seeking to validate his predictions. They were simply recording the events of their day. The unbiased testimony of these men will be cited throughout this commentary, along with the New Testament record, to affirm the fulfillment of the Lord's predictions. Jesus began speaking of the things that would precede the sign of the end in AD 66 by warning his disciples not to be deceived by counterfeit messiahs. He later explained that false deliverers and false prophets would arise and perform great signs and wonders so as to deceive even the elect, if it were possible. According to the New Testament, God would allow such men to perform false miracles before the Lord's return to delude and condemn those who had refused him. 2 Thessalonians 2:9-12 and John 5:43. Both Acts and Josephus record the appearance of two prominent false prophets before the sign of the end. The first of these is Theudas, that's Theudas, like Theudas. Acts tells us that this man claimed to be somebody and deceived about 400 men, Acts 5:36. Josephus recorded that Theudas was a magician who claimed to be a prophet, and he went on to deceive many. According to Josephus, Theudas gathered a multitude at the Jordan River during the procuratorship of Thaddeus, circa AD 44-46, claiming that he would part it before their eyes. However, Thaddeus sent troops to meet him, and they killed Theudas along with many of his followers. The second false prophet who appears in both Acts and the writings of Josephus is known as the Egyptian. Acts informs us that this man led 4,000 Jews in a revolt against Rome, Acts 21:36. Josephus recorded that the Egyptian claimed to be a prophet and gathered a multitude on the Mount of Olives during the procuratorship of Felix, circa AD 52 to 60, declaring that he would command the walls of Jerusalem to fall so they could overtake the city. However, Felix sent soldiers to put down this rebellion, and about 400 of his followers were slain. Acts describes two other prominent false prophets who appear before AD 66, Bar-Jesus and Simon. Bar-Jesus opposed the disciples and performed signs and wonders that deceived even the most intelligent men. Acts 13:6-7. Simon also astounded people with his magic arts and was called the Great Power of God. Acts 8:9-11, a title that belongs to the Messiah. 1 Corinthians 1:24. Simon initially received the gospel, but his actions demonstrated that his faith was not sincere. Acts 8, verses 13 and 23. Tradition tells us that he later returned to his magic, declared himself to be God incarnate, and deceived many. The fulfillment of the Lord's prophecy of false prophets is affirmed elsewhere in the New Testament as well. John, writing after the cross, declared that many false prophets had gone out into the world. 1 John 4:1-3. He claimed that their appearance evidenced that the prophesied anti-Christian spirit had come, and thus the last hour was present. 1 John 2:18. Paul, Peter, and Jude also warned the church about false prophets and apostates who were to appear in the last days, and confirmed that such had arrived. 2 Peter 2:1 and verse 13, 1 Timothy 4:1-7, 2 Timothy 3:1-13. Thus, in fulfillment of the Lord's prediction, the Roman world was overrun by counterfeit messiahs and prophets before the end, or the time of the end, commencing in AD 66. Some performed false signs and wonders, promising to deliver the Jews from Gentile oppression. However, these pretenders gave the Jews no such relief, but only served to gather them for slaughter by the Roman authorities. So I'll pick it up again tomorrow. I'll start recording at an earlier time because it's about 10:30. I try to get to bed for about 11 o'clock these days. But yeah, no, I think there's a lot to think about here. Certainly, I would say the author of this book has evidenced to us listening that certainly the qualification of false prophets, false messiahs coming before the end is met in the first century before 70 AD. And that should mean something to everyone inclined towards truth. So yeah, that answers a question, a pressing question that was on the mind of one of our viewers, and I thank you for all questions. Again, if you ask a question, it's to be taken seriously, and I know it comes from an earnest place. I never want to answer a question and mean-spiritedly or anything like that. I want you to feel everyone to feel comfortable, just to show their personality and just say what they have on their minds. I'll turn to the comments now. I know that the Joyful Preterist was asking me. I saw the comment looking for that other Australian that's out there. Their username is Ageratos, so I'm sure if they feel the inclination, they can find your comment. So Ageratos, the Joyful Preterist, seeks your counsel should you desire to speak to them. So there's Sonic saying hello. Hello, Sonic from Texas. We have David De La Garza. Ciao. Is that how I say it? Is that good? We have Shook the Stars from the Sky. Hello, my friend. Hi there. Thank you very much for joining me. Again, this is a little short video, guys. I'm going to do a longer one later on, maybe tomorrow or maybe later on in the week. And I'll just continue to go through some of this and some pressing questions, because I think we have a wonderful resource here in this book. So thank you for joining me today, guys. It's always great to hear from you. I mean, it really is. But we'll have a proper wee hang sesh later on in the week, and just a wee bit earlier, because it's a wee bit late here in Scotland. As I say, it's going on to 10:30 now. So thank you very much for watching. God bless you. Pursue the truth, get your wee activities going. I've got my wee activities building, and hopefully, yeah. But let's see, by springtime, the world will be a bit more free, and we'll be able to express ourselves a little more liberally. All right. God bless, guys. Speak to you soon.